can see on the ground at Town Hall where that marker is. Their intent is to only widen the road 2 feet in front of us. So there's not going to be any additional paving onto anything that's currently our property, but our planting bed does go through part of that area now. So what they would do is be purchasing pretty much the last crepe myrtle and the plants underneath it would fall under their jurisdiction. They would send us an appraiser. The appraiser would work through a process to determine the value of the land, and then they would make an offer to purchase. And we would either be able to move those plants or count them as part of the appraisal process. So that's an area that they are purchasing outright. The next area, that lighter area, is a permanent utility easement, which is another 1,000 square feet approximately, that runs another 25 feet onto our property. And the reason why they're requesting this property, or basically condemning this property, is because further, as you move closer to 220, the road's going to widen. 150 is going to widen to take in 4 lanes at the intersection. So they're going to have to put in more pavement, which is going to push all their ditch lines out, which then makes you have to move the utility poles. So while the utility pole in front of our property is not moving, one's close to the 220R, and that changes how they cross the property. And instead of leaving it as they used to apparently just do utility easements that were not of a permanent nature. Now they're permanent nature utility easements, so they will actually send an appraiser for that property too. The difference is that we will still technically own that property, but they are willing to pay some amount because of the use restriction. This does impact us somewhat on our plans that were underway for Winfrey Park. This area was not a part of their original planning for the widening, so it was a surprise that they included this area in the plans, but we don't believe it's really going to have a significant effect on what we were proposing to be done in that area. We're just holding off on it until we can see them stake out the areas involved, make sure there's going to be no issues. Essentially what we're going to end up with is a grass area, and we'll probably still continue to maintain it because we have DOT schedule. So it's just an area that they're acquiring from us. They'll be sending appraisers out to go through that process. The athletic field property will also have some easement effect. They are going to come up real close to the existing home, but they're just asking for permanent utility easements in that area. They're not asking for additional right-of-way. Marshall property on Lower Summerfield Road, 220, is essentially in the same position. They are going to be taking right-of-way, but not necessarily the house itself. All of this, though, really was a surprise when this all started a couple weeks ago, in that I had a conversation with the local branch manager of DOT specifically about this project and what the plans were, and he had told me at that time that they had put everything on hold. Well, it turns out that what they did was they brought people from another division to do all the appraisal work and all the contact work, and they were not aware of that locally. Now they are, of course, but they weren't at the time. So up and down 220, a number of property owners have been getting phone calls from right-of-way agents from DOT to have these sorts of discussions. And what's reversed around with that is that they're now contacting the town and wanting to know what they should do, basically. So in some cases, there are people who are having road frontage removed to the point where they may not have as good access as they used to have. They are wanting to put in controlled access fences all along the 220 route, which would basically be wire fences and up and down 220. All properties that face 220 will only have a single point of access, including the food line property. So there's going to be pretty significant changes through all this. So one question I have for council is, while we don't, again, this is similar to other issues that we face, especially with transportation, we don't have a lot of say, especially on a state and federal highway such as 220. But because of the types of phone calls we've been getting on it and people asking questions, would the council like me to hold a public meeting with everyone that has a property, invite them to a public meeting, and they can try to get some of their questions answered as far as what type of effect it'll have on their development potential of their property. Everything from the person who has their septic system taken out, as far as, well, what does that mean for them? How do they go about rebuilding? To those that will suddenly end up with less acreage than what's required under ordinance, what does that mean for them? How can they continue, could they still have the property? All the way up to the situation at the food line where they're actually closing right away. And then the overreaching question that I kind of have for the council is, what do you think about a fence running up and down 220, 4 feet tall?
Don't we have some kind of order requirements of the state? Just do we have no option to try to deal with?
Well, I don't think we have no option. I think we have to decide whether we're going to try to do something about that and see if there's other alternatives, whether they're personal alternatives that people put forward instead of having that fence, or some sort of agreed design of that fence.
You're talking about a chain link fence?
It's a wire fence, not chain link. It's more like
Like down the interstate.
Oh, okay.
about 4 feet tall is what I was told.
Well, does this mean that they're planning to do an access road
They're going
all along?
No, it's going to be controlled access, but every property will have a single point of access. So everyone who has property fronting on 220 will continue to have at least one access point. But that's all they'll have, and they'll come up with controlled access fences.
They're not giving any deference to commercial properties?
They haven't indicated that they are. Now, again, I haven't had all the conversations about it, but my understanding is that they're planning on putting it up and down.
So
Now,
this is a change from what they have proposed?
this is the first time I'd ever heard of a fence. Now, maybe it was always there, but this is the first time I've actually had it discussed. Now, when it came to the park property and we had the discussion about the athletic fields, I explained to them that we were probably going to put in our own fence anyway, for our own purposes, and could we agree not to put a fence in front of it? And they did agree to that. So it may be a case where individually, case by case, they may have to make that request. But places where someone doesn't ask, or they may mandate it in some cases, I don't know all the details. The fence was a surprise.
Maybe we really need to call the other property owners so they know that they at least have the option to say if they want to do something different.
And I don't know if they're giving that deference to us because we're the government, so they can feel like they can trust the fact that we put in that fence versus individual property owner. I don't know exactly what the state's position is on this fence issue, but they indicated that they wanted the fence up and down 220.
A lot of those people are sort of elderly and lived there for a lot of years. I think anything we can do to help them, we ought to do. At least ease their mind anyway.
But we can't negotiate for them, and I can't even tell them anything. I can only give them so much information. But my thought on it is that if we can at least offer the opportunity to put them all in the same room and talk about all the common issues, then maybe we can help some people out about it. Maybe better off, but
Help them understand what's coming.
and what they can ask for and what they should be. That depends. I don't want it to become a. I don't know if that would be appropriate or not. I've been thinking about that.
all their questions?
I won't be able to answer all their questions, but I don't know if they'll come.
Pass them along.
Right.
To piggyback what the manager said, I do have some concerns with not having a DOT representative there, because I don't want citizens to believe that we are empowering them to do something that we have no authority to do. Now, certainly we can tell them if, in fact, there's the dimensions of their property change, that they, in fact, would be a legally existing non-conforming use from a planning standpoint. We can certainly talk about the general law of right-of-way acquisition and condemnation. I'm concerned about proposing or giving them any misinformation, if you will, or leading them to believe that we're the persons to come to. So I certainly would suggest a DOT representative be there. I'm not negating that if they're not there, then we shouldn't hold the meeting, because I do believe that the manager is correct. There are some common issues that we can discuss with regard to all properties.
I just think it would be more helpful